So hope you can also see my screen now. I just shared it.
Yes, your screen is clear to me, Aaron.
Good. So we'll start with the ASM and understanding about ASM. Basically, exactly, I think you know the definition of ASM, so I won't get into ASM. So apart from the normal definition of ASM, there are many other things that ASM does. The starting is it's a volume manager. So what is a volume manager, or what do you think a volume manager will do?
A volume manager is like a management utility that manages logical volumes, you know.
Yes. What do you
When
mean by a volume over here?
It's like these spaces, a
Mhm.
combination of these or stacks of these put together to act as a as one volume, as a
Co-
unit volume. Yeah.
Correct. I'll give you an example. Let's take you want to store data which is like 5 or 10 terabytes big, or the size of the data is 10 terabytes. But in your storage, every hard disk or every single disk that you have is of only 1 terabyte, which means if you want to store 10 terabytes of data on 1 TB hard disk, you need to physically distribute the data onto 10 hard disks. Am I right?
Yes.
But what the storage software will do, it will manage the multiple disks and it will show the collective multiple disk as one single disk to the outside world or to the other systems. Now, when we install the volume manager or storage software or maybe any other software that manages the hard disks, what it will do, it will actually create a group of disks, and that group is known as a volume. Now, one volume, the best part is it can have one physical hard disk or it can have multiple physical hard disks. Now, the best part about the storage software is it will take care of internally how to store physically the data onto the disks which are assigned to one single volume. So that's why ASM also has the capability of volume manager, which means if we assign multiple disks to ASM, ASM can handle the disk, ASM can add the disk from a volume, ASM can remove a disk from the volume, ASM can perform the redundancy of the storage, and ASM can also perform the balancing, the load balancing inside the disks. So what is load balancing and all? Definitely we'll see it after some time. But initially, ASM provides the volume manager layer, which is needed by every storage software. If you do not have a volume manager capability in a software, in a storage software, then you again go for third party tools. So this is the reason ASM is also a volume manager, and ASM also acts as a file system. So what do you mean by file
Um,
system? Yeah, tell me.
does ASM support hot swapping of disk?
Yes, hot, and that
Okay.
too when the database is up and running. Don't worry, we'll definitely look at those things. So uh, now let us understand what is the file system. What do
Are you
you
asking me?
understand? Yes.
Yeah, the file system is the normal way Oracle stores files in a standalone database without using ASM. You know, it stores files in the database in terms of like file directories.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. So that's how in the hard disk directly on the hard disk. So that's how I see it. I don't know if it's something different. I don't.
See, a file system is basically a storage. What that means is you can use this storage or file system to store your data. Best part about ASM is you can use it as a file system or storage area for your Oracle database. Now there is a one twist over here, or one point is over here is that the Oracle clusterware, right? Oracle clusterware. You can use Oracle clusterware for any third-party software where you want to maintain or administer the cluster. So this can be used, you can use it for cluster management, not only for Oracle, but for any other infrastructure. Let's take you want to administer the cluster in your environment. You can even install Oracle Clusterware and just administer the cluster. It is not mandatory that you install the Oracle Clusterware only when you install the Oracle Rack. So that's why Oracle Clusterware can be installed separately just to manage a cluster in any environment.
Okay.
But
Okay.
there is a twist. Oracle ASM, this one is not a storage software for all the third-party application. It is it is file system storage only for Oracle database, Oracle Rack or standalone database, which means you can configure ASM, but the files which you can store in ASM would only be related to either Oracle standalone database or Oracle Rack database. You cannot install Oracle ASM and manage third-party data inside Oracle ASM. It won't work, or it is not supported yet. Maybe in the coming versions it might be supported. That's a different case. So Oracle ASM is a volume manager. That's good because it manages all the disks and disk groups inside the system. And then file system means it allows storage only for Oracle standalone or Oracle RAC databases. Now there is a question. Sometimes in interview they'll ask you what type of files can I store in ASM? So do you know the answer?
Yes, only binary files are
So can you give me example of some of those binary files?
like the SP file,
Apart from normal
um,
database files.
apart from normal database files,
Yeah.
the SP file is not a normal database file, right? Archive log files,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, redo log files,
Okay.
control files,
These all are database
yeah, all
files.
those,
Apart from database
yeah,
files.
um, what other file again?
Arman backups
Automan backups, and those are archive log files, right? Okay, Automan backups are different from archive logs. So
and
Automan backups and
flashback logs
archive log or flashback logs too. Okay,
and
all right.
export import dump files.
Okay,
Yeah. Basically you can put everything over there except p file because p file is a text file. You can even put a password file over there. All these files apart from p file are always in binary mode. Okay, great. Now the power of ASM, we know that it's a volume manager and file system. Now let's move further and get inside the other concepts of ASM. So the first thing that we're gonna learn in ASM is disk groups. So what is a disk group in ASM?
that would be a collection of these that make a volume. I don't know.
Perfect. Collection of disks which make volume. But actually this term volume is not used in ASM. ASM uses the same term called as disk groups. So I'll write the original term. We call it as volume manager, but internally every volume in ASM is known as disk groups. Even if you want to create a disk group, it generally means you are creating a new volume when you compare it with other storage softwares. But the correct term for volumes in ASM is disk groups. So disk group is nothing but is a collection of disks which makes a disk group, or you can call it as a volume.
Adam, I
Now,
have a question for you.
tell me,
Yeah, what are external tables, Arun? I've been reading around that thing. I don't know.
what are
External tables for
e-
storage of document or
e-
files.
extended or external?
Extended tables.
Mm,
I think it's external. I don't think it's extended.
it should be external.
Yeah, because there are tables that you cannot put an index on them, but you can query them and save data on them.
Yeah, just send me the content where you have read. I'll look at the
Okay.
content and let you know.
All right.
Because it depends. See, if you are using DB links, then the meaning is different. If you are using materialized views, the meaning is different. And if you are accessing via network using Oracle client is totally different. So I want to read that content and give you the correct picture.
Okay.
Fine. So what basically makes a disk group? It is a collection of the disk at OS level. Now, apart from disk groups, the property of disk group is you can assign a name to the disk groups. Can assign, I would say you must assign a name to disk group. Do you remember the name we assigned to our disk group?
Yeah, I'm ASM1, right?
Perfect. So the first disk group that we have assigned the name is ASM1. Similarly, you can assign multiple names to your disk groups, and this is a must because in rack environment you can identify the disk easily. It makes your job easy to identify and know that okay, this is ASM1 disk group and this is ASM2, ASM3. It helps you to distinguish the disk groups. Apart from ASM1, the recommended minimum ASM structure, which is given by Oracle, is you must have three disk groups for basic Oracle rack configuration. What are those three? The first one is CRS disk group.
Voting this
No, no,
group.
no, wait. To store cluster related files. All the cluster related files will get into CRS disk group, then data disk group to store database files like data files, etc. And finally, you should have FRA disk group. FRA is like fast recovery area to store
Mm-hmm.
FRA files. So these are the three disk groups which are minimum recommended by Oracle that you should create. But what we have done, rather than CRS disk group, we have created ASM1. So do you remember where did we give this disk group name ASM1?
Yeah, on the share server, right?
Yes, we did. But what exactly is the stage where we were naming the disk group? Do you remember?
I don't remember the stage.
When we installed the ASM binaries, post ASM binaries, we had issued some command Oracle ASM create disk. So that command will add this name to the physical disk, anything like slash dev slash sdc1. Just giving an example. So that
Yeah.
command will add this name to this physical disk. Any which ways, it's a mandatory that you use a name, so it makes your life easy. So any doubts in these groups?
No.
Okay. Next is disks. So what are the disks, or what exactly is a disk?
These are just hard drives, Aaron.
Physical hard disk
Hard
drive
disk.
storage. So one hard disk, can it belong to multiple disk groups?
No,
Cannot belong to two disk groups, but multiple, I'll write it in the next line. Multiple hard disk drives can belong to one
one disk group.
single disk group.
Perfect.
Good. And also remember one thing, whenever you get confused about disks and disk groups, remember disk group as a table space and disks as a data file. So in a table space, you can have multiple data files, but a single data file cannot be assigned to two table spaces. Am I right?
That's true.
Correct. So that's a way to remember. Now the next question is, what all storage types can be considered as ASM storage? So types of storage considered for ASM, because we have multiple types of disks. So which one do we consider for our ASM storage? So the first one is complete hard disk device partition. You remember we have added one disk and we made a complete partition and assigned it to ASM1. So it's the same what I'm talking over here. It's like you completely create only one partition in the hard disk and then you assign it to an ASM disk. And that is what we have done. Okay?
It was a raw partition, right, Aaron?
Yes. We did not create any physical file system onto it. It was raw. We just assigned the disk to it. Next is
Okay.
multiple partitions assigned to single ASM disks. What do I mean over here? Let us assume we have added a new disk slash dev slash SDC1. Let's take SDC. Under SDC, we have created multiple partitions slash dev SDC1, then SDC2. Likewise, we have many SDC. I'm taking it till 8, okay?
All right.
Now, these single partitions can also be considered or assigned to single ASM disks. So we can format them with the ASM create disk command, and then we can use this disks as single ASM disks. So that's why
Okay.
I'm saying like either we can have the complete partition, either we create one single partition for the entire disk and assign it to an ASM disk, or we can have multiple partitions within a single disk and then assign each partition as single disk to the ASM, right?
But all the partitions must belong to one disk group, right?
No, not at all. You can assign them separately. That is what I am saying. I can create one disk. Let's take an example. ASM2, then ASM3, likewise ASM7 or 8, whatever it is. Now, I can create a disk group between ASM2 and ASM3. I can create a disk group between ASM3 and ASM4. So these disks can be used individually. That is what I'm saying. These are not disk groups. These are disks. Then I can use this disk as per my requirement into multiple disk groups. So these
Okay.
partitions can be used as single disk. That is what I'm saying.
All right.
Not a single
Okay.
disk group. Single disk.
Okay.
Okay. So complete hard disk partition you can use as a single disk, or multiple hard disk partition assigned to single ASM disk. See, that is what I mentioned over here. Or next, you can have NFS storage. or if you have a network file system, you can have the logical partitions and do it, or you can even have LUNs allocated from the storage.
But Aaron, when you say this, it contradicts what we already had before, right?
Tell me.
If you say if you say you can have multiple partitions and then you can store them on different disk groups, then it contradicts because the multiple partition are coming from one disk, right?
Okay, so what's the confusion over there?
Because like what you were saying that you can have data files on a table space, but you cannot have multiple data files on different table spaces,
Right, see,
or one.
this is a single disk. This single disk can be assigned only to one disk group, but this single disk cannot be assigned to multiple disk groups. So when I say one single disk group can have multiple disks, it means a single disk group can have ASM2, a single disk group can have ASM3. Don't consider ASM1 as a disk group. We have created only ASM1 with one disk, that is /dev/sdc1. But I
Yeah.
can again go ahead and add /dev/sdd1. I can keep on adding in this disk group. But physically, this is only one disk. You got the
Okay.
point. I can add
Yes.
multiple disk groups. Now, because we had only one disk, that is why we created only one disk group with one single disk. But I still have that flexibility to add disk to this ASM1. That is what. So don't get confused
So
between this one and these disks.
so the ASM is like a big file table space right now.
You can
SM1.
you can consider it as a normal table space which has only one data file. Right now, if I want
Yeah.
to add multiple data files, I can assign from these data files. Consider these disks as data files.
So each partition can be a standalone disk on its own, right? That's
Yes,
what you're saying.
yes. Each partition is
Okay.
can be assigned to single ASM disk. Now, when you assign it to
Okay.
single ASM disk, that ASM disk can be used under disk groups.
Okay. All right. Makes
Fine.
sense.
Yeah. Next is LUNs allocated from the storage. Now, this is a issue over here. Oracle does not recommend this. Can you give me an answer like why Oracle does not recommend for LUNs and all?
Because there is logical is volatile, right?
No, not like that.
I cannot come up with an answer for it. Yeah.
Okay. What happens? Your ASM is already a volume manager. So when you allocate LUNs from the storage server, the storage software is again a volume manager. So two volume managers are not recommended for storing the data. You just have one volume manager, it's enough. Of course, people use the LUNs because there is no other option or no better option right now. But it is not recommended because you have redundancy of the volume manager. You have volume manager at the ASM level, then again at the storage level, you have a volume manager that increases the headache. So that's why LUNs are preferred but are not recommended frequently.
Okay.
So this is about the disks in ASM. So the ASM is a volume manager, it's a file system, it it's a collection of disk groups. One single disk group is a single allocation unit of the storage, and each disk group consists of physical disks at OS level. The physical disk can be a complete hard disk partition or multiple hard disk partitions which can be assigned to single disks. Now these single disks can again be used inside the disk groups. So that is how the ASM functions. Any doubts till now?
No, that's fine.
Good. Let us get inside the ASM instance. What exactly is Oracle ASM Instance? So what idea do you have till now about Oracle ASM Instance?
That's that's the background processes that communicate with the ASM, the storage.
Yeah, basically Oracle ASM is built on the same technology as of an Oracle DB instance. So it's built on same technology as of database instance. When I say it's built on the same technology, it means it also has an SGA plus background processes. Perfect. So ASM instance also has the same DB instance components, like you have buffer cache, you have the other memory components like what you have in SGA, but you will never have the redo log buffer cache because your ASM instance never generates any redo logs. Okay, it's
Okay.
yeah, it's only a mediator between your Oracle instance and the storage disk. So ASM instance is very small when you compare it with the database instance because it performs very few tasks. It doesn't have to write into or it doesn't have to read from the disk, or it doesn't have to store data in the instance, or it doesn't have to perform the same database operations that a DB instance performs. So basically it's smaller in size when compared to DB instance, which means the size of the ASM instance need not be the same as the size of the database instance. It will always be smaller than the database instance. So where is Oracle ASM installed?
Are the share storage, Aaron?
No.
Oh, the grid home?
Yes. ASM binaries comes with grid, the grid software. When you install the grid software, then automatically ASM is installed, and ASM binaries reside in the same grid home where you install the clusterware. Remember one thing,
Okay.
how can you conclude this one? When you want to connect to Oracle ASM instance, your Oracle home should be pointing to,
The grid home.
so it simply means that ASM binaries are installed under
The
grid
grid home.
home. Okay.
Okay.
Next is we have the Oracle ASM instance, but what exactly is stored in the ASM instance? Or when we say that Oracle ASM instance is same as database instance, then there should be some type of storage or some type of metadata that is there inside the ASM. Am I right? So what could be that
Yes.
metadata, or what could be that data inside the ASM?
That would be ASM processes, uh, data generated by the different
No, no,
uh,
no, no.
unit volumes for the disk, you know.
Almost
Um,
correct.
uh, yeah, like data of the volume names, the volume size,
Correct.
the uh, the number of files that are stored in the volume. It's like the naming of tables or the table headers in the database, you know,
Correct.
where information is stored. You know, it names
Basically,
all the table headers with the information that is in the table together with the indexes or or the numbers where the rows are the information is stored on the rows, you know.
mhm,
Sorry. Yeah.
not really. So ASM manages the exact metadata of the disk groups. So how or number of disk group, what is the utilization of the disk, how the files are stored, where the file is stored, and all those metadata information about the disk groups. And basically the ASM instance, it provides the file layout information to the Oracle instance. When your Oracle instance communicates to ASM instance stating that, okay, I want to store this data. Next is ASM takes care from there. ASM provides the file layout or the disk group layout to the Oracle instance, stating like, okay, we have these all storage areas, and uh, you can utilize them. Where do you want to store? So then Oracle instance directs it to like, okay, you can go ahead and store it into like data disk group or FRA disk group or CRS disk group, or maybe if you have any other disk group, you can just allow the instance ASM to store the data. So ASM instance is like a mediator between the storage, that is your disk groups, and your Oracle instance. And every node or every single machine has one ASM instance running on it. So let us assume we have 3 DB instances. Then how many ASM instances will be there?
At least three, right?
No, there is a twist. On a single machine, there will always be one DB instance, one ASM instance, irrespective of number of DB instances. So we have 3 DB instances on a single machine. Then also we'll still have one ASM instance shared by all the DB instances. Yeah. You don't have multiple ASM instances. You just have one ASM instance which is shared by multiple DB instances running on a single node.
So the background process in ASM do not grow larger. I mean, when you store a lot of information in the ASM, Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
right, and
Mm-hmm.
the files are really large and stuff, when you try to extract the information from ASM, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe you want to do a backup, you
Yeah.
you have background processes that are generated, right? Many background processes,
You're talking about
right?
the database backup,
Yeah, maybe you want to do a database backup. You recruit a lot of background processes to speed the process up, right?
but database backup is taken by Armin, not ASM.
But the files are stored in ASM, right?
So storing of files is like allocating channel directly to the disk group. So there is no picture of ASM that comes in between. The Armin will directly write into the ASM disk group.
Okay,
There
all
is
right,
no overhead on the ASM instance. ASM
all right. That's what I
instance,
wanted to know.
yeah, ASM instance. See, I'll give you one more example. Let's take you're taking an Armin backup. When you take an Armin backup onto an OS level disk, does it give some overhead to the operating system? Not really.
No,
It
the
just
job goes to admin.
correct. Similarly, if you allocate channels to ASM disk group, Armin will continue to write and ASM instance will continue to perform until the disk group is full or some other issue. Definitely it will prompt you. Otherwise, it's not an overhead to ASM,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Fine. So this is about Oracle ASM instance on a single instance DB or standalone DB. So I'll mention it once again. So Oracle ASM instance on standalone database. Now, what is the change when it comes to a Oracle ASM instance on rack?
Aaron, let me ask one question before we go ahead. Okay,
Tell me.
is is mirroring supported in Oracle ASM?
Sorry, is?
Mirroring, mirroring of the disk groups. Is it
Yes,
supported in Oracle?
yes. When we talk about volume manager, it definitely means that striping, mirroring, load balancing, everything is performed or everything is supported by Oracle ASM. So don't worry, we'll come to that topic.
Okay.
We are we are just 10% of ASM. There's a lot more to see. So don't worry. Fine. What is the difference between Oracle ASM on standalone database and Oracle ASM instance on rack?
I just think is where the ASM is stored, and how it's accessed. For a standalone database, you just have the instances of the database communicating with the ASM. And but for a rack configuration, then you have multiple nodes accessing the ASM, so it's supposed to be integrated with a shared storage.
Hmm.
You know.
Not really. Even on a standalone database, if you want to configure ASM, the disk group must be shareable. Because let's take tomorrow you want to convert this standalone database to a rack database, then it will be very easy for you because you already have the shared storage, you already have the grid home, you already have the ASM, you just need to add the nodes to the cluster. Am I right?
Yes.
So, no, that's not the answer. I'll only pick up one sentence out of all these points, that is this one. In a rack environment, every single machine, or I'll change this one to node, has one ASM instance running on it. When I say one ASM instance running on it, it means every node has one ASM instance which will take care of that particular node Oracle database instance communication to the storage. Am I right?
Okay. All right.
I'll describe it over here. We have multiple nodes and we have the shared storage. Now let us assume we have the DB instance over there on each node, and we also have one single ASM instance running on each node. What DB instance will do, it will communicate with the ASM instance for the storage or for the retrieval of the data from the shared disk, like this. Perfect. But
Yes.
the difference over here is, let us assume you have one rack setup which is configured on, or one rack database which is configured on node 1, node 2, node 3, and node 4, and you use DBCA to create another rack DB which is using only 3 nodes. That means you have one more rack DB instance running only on the 3 nodes because you have configured it on node 1, node 2, and node 3. You can very well do it. What will happen? Even the second instance will use the same ASM instance. There won't be a new ASM instance for the second instance, which means every node, irrespective of number of the database instances, we will have only one ASM instance. That
All
is the
right.
benefit. Perfect.
Okay.
So every single machine node has one ASM instance running on it. So any doubts till now?
No, no, that's fine, Aaron.
Now, Oracle ASM instance failure. I'll ask you a question. Let's take the Oracle ASM instance fails on a node. What will happen?
Then
What will happen to
that
the DB instances?
the DB instances will communicate with the voting disk to notify the voting disk that instance node is failed, and then there will be a switch over to a node that is currently running, and administration of the ASM will still continue without the user even noticing that there was a failure.
Not really. I'm talking in terms of what exactly happens to the database instance when there is ASM instance failure.
The database instance will not be able to write to the storage, right?
Okay, what will happen if, let's take your database is running and suddenly you delete all the data files?
It's gonna stop running and crash, you know. It
Correct.
cannot open.
Similarly, if ASM instance fails, your DB instance will also fail because it is not able to access the storage. And if you want to start or stop the ASM instance, I will talk about only stopping the ASM instance. This is a very important interview question. People will ask you like, can I stop the ASM instance when DB is up and running? What will be the answer?
Um, you can stop it as a root user.
No, you cannot. Even if you try to stop it, it won't stop because every single DB instance must be stopped before the storage is stopped. Otherwise,
Okay,
your database instance will crash. You need to
all right.
stop all the DBs accessing the ASM before stopping the ASM
Yes.
instances, right? So
Okay.
this is the procedure to stop the ASM instance. You first stop all the database which are accessing the ASM instances, and once all the databases are stopped, and then only you can stop the ASM instance. Okay?
Okay.
Now,
All right.
from 12c onwards, 12c rack, there is a new feature called as ASM instance failover. What this means is, let us assume, I mean, there is a new term for this one. It is Oracle ASM Flex Cluster. If you configure Oracle ASM Flex Cluster, let us assume the ASM instance on one node fails. The Oracle instance running on that node will use the ASM instance of the other node to communicate with the storage rather than failing. I'll explain you from here. You have this node 1, you have node 2. Node 1 is having the DB instance. Node 2 is also having the DB instance. Node 1 ASM instance, node 2 ASM instance. Now, let us assume ASM on the node 1 fails. So initially DB was communicating with the ASM instance and then the shared disk. So over here also like this. When the ASM instance fails on node 1, the DB instance of node 2 will communicate via your private interconnect, and it will use the ASM of the node 2 and then communicate to the disk. So which means your
That's
still
that's what I
DB,
thought.
yeah, the still your DB instance on the node 1 can function. So this is
Okay.
again guarantee you the high availability. But in 11G, let's take your ASM instance is not working, your DB instance will fail and your node 1 will go down. So you are missing a lot of resources just because one ASM instance is not running. So from 12C onwards, you have something called as Oracle ASM Flex cluster. You need to configure this Flex cluster in order to make one node DB instance talk to the ASM instance of the second node. Then only it will work. Perfect.
Yes.
Do you think it's a very added advantage to the ASM?
That's what I thought before. You remember you asked me the question, that's what I thought, that if you are gonna shut down ASM on one node, then
Mm-hmm.
it should switch to use the ASM on another node to communicate with the database in a rack configuration without the user even knowing that something like that happened, you know?
Yeah, only if it is configured, and that too it's available only from 12C rack. Because we are looking
Okay,
or understanding the 11G rack, that's why I didn't tell you that answer. If I tell you, you might make it permanent and then it will confuse you later. So you should not tell that one when it comes to 11G rack. But to use that
okay,
feature, you must have configured Oracle ASM Flex Cluster, and only if this is configured, then only ASM instance will fail over automatically. Perfect.
okay,
Now next is
yes.
ASM mirroring and failure groups. So what exactly is mirroring, or what is the other term that is used frequently for mirroring?
This copy,
Yes, mirroring is a disk copy, and the other word which is used very frequently apart from mirroring is redundancy. So mirroring is basically maintaining a copy
now identical copy.
of your data. When I say mirroring, it means we have a hard disk or a disk group, and the same disk group is mirrored onto another disk group. What it will do is, let's take the first disk group fails, we still have the second disk group which will take over or which will provide the data required to the ASM instance or any other database instance. That is why Oracle ASM internally provides you mirroring. This helps you to control over the data redundancy from your end rather than depending on the third party teams like storage team or maybe the network team or maybe some XYZ team. Don't you think it's a good feature and it's important to have for an ASM instance administrator? Because if you allow the storage team to have the storage level redundancy, then you don't have the grip,
Yes, that's true.
right? So basically,
Yes,
when you create a disk group, you have the choice to assign or to tell the redundancy level. But if you create a disk group once, you can never change the redundancy level. So you have to mention the redundancy at the time of disk group creation.
okay.
Once done,
And
you cannot change it. Yeah, tell me.
change it. But you can delete this group and recreate it all over, right? And then
Definitely you
put the
can do it.
new.
Yes, you can do it. So what
The
are the,
question was that I was going to ask.
yeah,
I
tell me.
mean, most of these groups they run on redundancy three, right? Or three or five, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
We are coming to that
Because
topic. Yeah, don't worry.
okay,
So types of redundancy in ASM. ASM provides you three types of redundancy. The first one is normal, which indeed means that two-way redundancy. Then you have high, that is three-way redundancy. And finally, we have external, no ASM level redundancy, NDNCY, or you can have external softwares for redundancy. Perfect. Let me explain you. When I say normal redundancy, it means minimum I can have two fail groups or two failure groups. Okay, let us understand about what is a failure group. You have any idea about failure group?
No, I just know it's two more copies of an original disk group
Yeah.
that the
One
disk can fail over to in case
in
in case the parent disk group has a problem.
sorry.
I say it's just a copy of the original disk group that the ASM can fail to in case the parent group has a problem, you know.
Perfect. One fail group, one single fail. It's not fail group, it's actually the term is failure group, but people generally use it like fail group or failure group. It's both one and the same. Don't get confused. But the actual term is failure group. So one single failure group is one single redundant copy, which means one single redundancy level, or let's say if I mention it as like external, that means no ASM level redundancy, which means only one original copy will be saved, which again means I have only one single failure group. So what do I mean by one failure group? When I have external redundancy, okay, don't worry, we'll understand the redundancy level once again. For now, just understand single failure group means one single redundant copy. So if I have one single redundant copy, if something happens to that redundant copy, do I have any other failure group?
No, don't have any failure group.
So it means I will lose the data, or if something happens to my one single redundant copy, I lost the data. Simple as that. So single failure group is nothing but one single redundant copy. If I want to create multiple failure groups to increase the redundancy, I will, or sorry, we can have multiple failure groups. Which means if I am talking about normal redundancy, which is saying two-way redundancy, then how many fail groups do we have?
Two failure groups.
Okay, this is like two failure groups. If something happens to the one failure group, I have the another failure group. And in this one, what you were saying, the redundancy levels are 3 copies or 5 copies. In the normal redundancy, you have two-way redundancy. That means two failure groups, but max you can have 3 failure groups. Next is you have high redundancy, that is three-way redundancy, which means 3 failure groups, and max you can have 5 failure
Fine.
groups.
Yeah.
To be very frank, nobody uses all this in real time. Maximum people will go for external redundancy because the data which is stored on the hard disk, they will allow the storage team to configure the redundancy at hard disk level. They don't go with the ASM redundancy groups. But any which ways, it depends.
Okay.
Some companies go for the ASM redundancy, some companies will go with the storage level redundancy, and that's why they configure the external redundancy. So I'll ask you a question. When we configured the ASM disk, that is ASM1, what is the redundancy level that we choose?
The redundancy level,
Yeah.
two-way redundancy, right?
hmm Let me pull up the document and then I'll show you the screen where we choose the redundancy. Okay. Do you remember the screen while installing the grid infrastructure? It asks us to select disk group characteristics and select disks. So the disk group we gave name as CRS and redundancy level was external, When I say external, it means I need to choose only one failure group. Am I right? And we chose only one failure group and we clicked on next when we were performing our activity. But if you go for a normal redundancy or a high level redundancy, in normal you have to minimum choose two failure groups. That means you need to choose two disks. And if I go for high
So
redundancy, then I need to choose minimum three failure groups. That means three disks.
okay.
Yeah. So we have configured our CRS disk group with external
So so
redundancy. Yeah.
so for external redundancy, you just have to choose a file path in the OS that is gonna copy your give you a data copy on that part, right?
Correct. But that disk group should be named or you must have already formatted it with the Oracle ASM. You remember we use the command Oracle ASM create disk. We assign a name like CRS volume 1. We have given our disk name as ASM1. Am I right? So
Yeah.
if you perform the formatting with the ASM, then only you can use it for the ASM instances.
All right.
Perfect. So any doubts in ASM mirroring and fail groups?
No, no, I think I'm getting it, Aaron.
Okay. So that's why I always say you need to have lot of patience to learn rack. Of course, you tend to jump pretty fast, like I want to know this, I want to know this. But if we go in a perfect flow, then you will automatically understand the things. So I'll explain you one more thing. See, when Oracle ASM actually allocates an extent or a storage unit on Oracle ASM Disk Group, it basically allocates a primary copy and also a mirror copy. So what happens to the mirror copy? The mirror copy is placed in each failure group, and that is also depending upon the redundancy level. So you got the point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do we define the failure group? While we create the disk group. So I'll write it down. We define the failure group while creating the disk group. So failure group is nothing but the redundancy. So the number of failure group means the level of redundancy. Simple as that.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So we are almost done with the concepts of ASM. Next is we have to deal with the practical ASM. So what we'll do is I will take a quick break for 5 minutes and then we'll start. Right?
All right, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So chalo, see you then in 5 minutes.
Okay, Aaron.
See you.
Yeah, I don't read around that before. Yes. Let me show you.
Yeah, Luther, I'm back.
Yes, Arun, I'm here.
Good. Now let us look at other parts of the ASM. So as I told you, ASM administration is totally altogether new topic. Now let us get inside how to administer the ASM. When we talk about ASM administration, we need to look at the tools or utilities provided by Oracle to administer the ASM. Now, the different utilities that we have to administer ASM are SQL Plus.
Okay.
So you remember SQL Plus because ASM instance is exactly same as database instance. So when you have SQL Plus for database instance, you also have SQL Plus for ASM instance. Perfect. Next is
Perfect.
ASM CMD. This is ASM command mode. ASM command mode. It's like a basic command mode that we have in operating system. You can have like CMD in Windows, and we have a terminal in Linux. Similarly, for ASM, we have ASM command mode. You can use ASM CMD for basic ASM commands, and those basic ASM commands are exactly similar like Linux commands. You can use ls-lrt or cd command to browse through the ASM disks or ASM folders.
Okay.
Next is ASM CA. This is ASM configuration assistant.
Assist.
It's
Okay.
like a GUI interface which will allow you to
Mhm.
add disks, remove disk,
All right.
create a disk group,
Okay.
remove a disk group. Yeah, you can mount the disk groups, you can dismount the disk groups, you can perform every ASM activity in this GUI interface. And best part is not only administration of the disk, you can perform the upgrade of the ASM.
Wow. Man,
Yeah.
this
So
is crazy.
you have three basic utilities to administer ASM, but these are the utilities which I would call them as available for standalone database. When we come into rack, we have multiple ASM instances, and to administer so many instances, we need to have a cluster level utility. Am I right? Because
Sure.
multiple ASM instances running means it becomes a cluster on multiple nodes.
Yeah.
Now to
Yes.
administer a cluster resource, because now ASM is running on multiple nodes, it becomes a cluster resource. It means
Yes.
cluster has to take care of ASM instances. It's running on multiple nodes, and that is why every cluster resource has to be taken care by the
Yes.
clusterware. No, not ASM, the clusterware. When your
Okay.
clusterware takes care, then there should be some clusterware level utility which will allow you to administer all the clusterware resources, correct? So the
Yes.
utility which,
CMC. No.
no, CRSCTL. So this is the utility clusterware level utility which allows you to administer all ASM resources. So these three are also there in rack, including SRVCTL. When you are in standalone, of course, you definitely have these three. But technically, if you talk in standalone, also SRVCTL is available. But there's no point because you don't have a cluster over there. You just have a single node. So you can administer the ASM very well with these three utilities only. When it comes to rack, ASM becomes a cluster resource because it runs on multiple cluster nodes. And cluster resource means there should be some clusterware utility to manage the cluster resource. And SRVCTL takes care of ASM instances. So what SRVCTL will do? Let us take you want to stop all the ASM instances at one shot on all the nodes. CRSCTL will do. If you want to start all the ASM instances at one shot, SRVCTL will do. I'm sorry, previously I told CRSCTL, it is SRVCTL. And
Mhm.
let us assume you want to check the status of ASM resources. SRVC, SRVCTL will do. Likewise, if you want to play around with ASM resources, SRVCTL will take care.
Okay.
Perfect. So these are the utilities that are available to us to administer the Oracle ASM. So for now, I would like to wind up our session because we have seen a lot of things today. I would like you to go through this video again. I'll share it immediately now because it's very important. There are
Yes.
more concepts coming in for ASM because we have to look at ASM administration in 3 or 4 sessions. We cannot just go in one session. So there are multiple things that will be coming up. Now let's take how to administer ASM with each utility. We have to play around with each utility. We have to look at the ASM instances. Then we have ASM parameter file. Later on, we have some important ASM parameters that we should know. And then we have to look at important ASM views that you should know as a DBA. And then we'll move on with the RAG database.
All right, Arun.
Right? So let me
Yes.
share this video with you immediately after the session. You go through the video, and tomorrow we'll continue again with the uh, new ASM concepts.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah. You have any questions before we wind up the session?
No, I think there's a lot of information that you have given.
Hmm.
I need to digest this information first, and then we can have more questions.
True. To be frank, I can continue, but it will be a lot for you. I don't
Yes,
want
that's
to
true.
burden you with more information. So let us continue the same flow in the next session, but make sure you complete this video by the next session.
Yes, I'll go through it.
Perfect. Chalo, take care then. Bye bye.
All right. Take care. Bye.